For most of you, I presume, your engagement with weeb media is mediated through translations. And there are some absolutely brilliant translators out there, and that very much includes Blue Lock's official translator Nate Durr. Nevertheless, some linguistic details and nuances invariably get lost in translation. Now, the past few months, a close friend of mine who's been learning Japanese has read Blue Lock in the original, and that's been an absolute joy of an experience on my end. She's shared loads of observations with me that I wasn't aware of, and helped me out with several linguistic queries for past videos. And during the process, I've been steadily accumulating notes from some of the most enjoyable discussions about Blue Lock I've ever had. And, well, what are friends really for if not to supply you with content to garner validations from strangers on the internet, right? So, I'm about to drop some absolute bombshells about details that everyone who only experiences Blue Lock through translation, which to be honest very much includes myself usually as well, might have been missing out on. Hello, my name is Sean, and I can't tell you how much joy this project has been for my inner philologists. Also, if you like what I do and want to help me fund custom artwork for the channel, consider signing up for my Patreon. My patrons also get access to my weekly podcast, where I set out my first thoughts on the new Blue Lock chapter, so if that sounds interesting to you, do consider checking it out. So, since I don't want to waste any more of your time, let me give you some of my absolute favourites right off the bat. This is from Barou's second goal in the Ubers match. In translation it reads, "And if the day comes where I can't become the number one king in the world, I'd rather go out in a blaze of glory." Well, this is by all means a perfectly serviceable English rendition of the surface level meaning of the passage. One key detail gets lost in translation. In the Japanese, Baro says, "Let me die graciously. Isagi yoku shinde yaru yo." In case you didn't catch it, the term graciously is quite remarkable in Japanese because it's literally the character for Isagi's name. Yes, Isagi means something akin to gracious, righteous, or noble. Yet, this is more than just a silly pun. It goes to the heart of Barou's greatest character moment in the NEL. Barou's awakening in the Ubers match took place because he'd been humiliated by Isagi. His subsequent rejection of the Uber system is, in that light, his last-ditch effort to finally surpass Isagi, and failure corresponds to sinking into the deepest pits of despair. In essence, Barou is fully conscious that he's wagering his very life with this attack to measure up against his greatest rival, meaning if he doesn't succeed, he'll accept death Isagi-yoi, graciously, but also by implication at Isagi's hands. This pun appears in another place as well. In chapter 284, when Isagi tells Loki to be a man and admit that you lost. In the original, the line goes Isagi yoku makemashitatte ieo, just graciously admit that you lost. But again, the underlying implication is admit that you lost to Isagi. Next one, and just as a warning, this is going to be quite vulgar. Just to stay true to the spirit of the manga, of course. Don't think that I'm deriving any pleasure from this whatsoever. So, there's a line that always popped out to me in the Manshine match. It's when Isagi chastises Yukimiya by calling him a masturbatory narcissist. And this one requires a bit of unpacking to fully make sense of it. In Kaiser's first interaction with Isagi, he flirtatiously establishes his place at the top of the hierarchy. And that's what Noa calls him out for. Now, in the Japanese, Noa says, "Ikage naose, sono mountokuse." That's enough of that mountain habit. The term mountal here is an English loanword that's originally used to describe an animal's reproductive behavior. Let's say, like how them doggies get it on. At some point though, the Japanese turned it into a figure of speech for acts that aim to assert dominance. And note how Blue Lock activates both of the term's connotations at the start of the NEL. By describing Kaiser as mountain Isagi, we understand that he's performing a form of power play, but also, by implication, that he wants to fuck like animals. Mountain behaviors get associated with Kaiser again when Chris Prince sizes him up in the Manshine match. Prince here chastises Kaiser for mountain weaker players while running away from those above him. So that now brings us to Isagi and Yukimiya. In Japanese, Yukimiya doesn't call his teammate a self-serving shithead, but rather a mountal kusoyaro, a mountain shithead, just like Kaiser. That's the comparison Yukimiya makes between the two. Isagi is unconsciously striving to dominate his teammates in the same way as Kaiser, and this is the ground on which he rejects Isagi's proposal. Yet, at its core, mountain is a metaphor derived from a sexual act, and that's what you need to understand the most vulgar retort in the series. Since Yukimiya is essentially refusing to be fucked by Isagi, the only remaining means for him to get off now is to wank all alone. And yes, that's in the Japanese as well, where Isagi calls him a self-conscious self-pleasurer. But to cap that off, let's go to the next page. In Japanese, Isagi's way of saying keep dreaming is actually quite remarkable. He tells him to kimochi-yoi yume daite, to pleasurably embrace his dream. Now, the first thing that I have to note here is, at least as far as I understand, the most common expression for dreaming wouldn't be yume daku, embracing a dream, but rather yume miku, seeing a dream. So on one level, Isagi is using a marked expression here because he's dealing with Yukimiya at the height of his figurative and literal blindness. By implication, he's no longer in a state where he can even see his dreams at all. Now, there is another way of saying to dream in Japanese, which is yume idaku. Idaku also means to embrace, like daku, but it's typically used much more figuratively or conceptually. So you would idaku a dream because that's not describing an actual physical act. So to say yume daku instead heavily emphasizes the physicality of Yukimiya's embrace. And in that light, it's quite interesting that this verb daku that's being used in a highly remarkable context can also be employed as a euphemism for lovemaking. And given that Isagi has just chastised Yukimiya for following his irrational desires rather than being mounted by his teammate like a good boy, which he equates to a figurative act of masturbation, I'd say it's not hard to imagine that him pleasurably embracing his dream has some further connotations here as well. Also, just to touch a bit more on how you typically see dreams in Japanese. That association, I think, explains why Yukimiya is among the characters most strongly connected with the concept of dreams throughout the story. In particular, this adds an extra layer of significance to his moment of despair upon receiving his diagnosis. Yukimiya begs his doctor to give him back his dream because in Japanese, losing his sight means losing his ability to dream concurrently. Let me turn to something completely different now, which is by far the most important factor preventing anyone from furnishing a perfectly accurate translation of Blue Lock. And that's a device called Gikun. As many of you undoubtedly know, Japanese has two scripts. The kana script, where each character corresponds to a particular syllable, and the logographic kanji script, where characters roughly represent a single word or concept. And for all you nerds out there who are furiously typing up comments about how Japanese has 3 scripts actually, just realize that by that logic, English has 2 scripts as well, uppercase and lowercase. Anyways, I digress. Since even the Japanese have realized that it's a tall order for younger readers to have internalized 2000 hieroglyphs through rote memorization just to read a comic strip, shonen manga like Blue Lock typically provide kana subtitles for its kanji characters, which are known as furigana. Just have a look at this page here. Here's a kanji, and right above, in minuscule print, it's written in kana, the furigana. That'll make sense, right? But here's where it gets wonky. At some point, Japanese authors started reverse engineering the furigana system for foreign words. When you use terms that don't have a kanji reading, you can, as it were, slap a kanji underneath to either provide a Japanese equivalent to the loanwords, or, which is what we'll be mostly concerned with here, to add some extra connotations to the phrase. And that phenomenon is called Gikun. Let me give you an example, and that'll also make it clear why it's extremely difficult to translate writing that relies heavily on Gikun. This is the spread from the climax of Rin's awakening in the U20 match, with his internal monologue going, "Ore wa egoisto, Rin itoshi nandayo." I'm the egoist, Rin itoshi. And that's also what you hear when you listen to the anime. However, in the manga, the loanword egoist, the one in brackets, is positioned above 3 kanji characters that read Hakaisha, destroyer. For all intents and purposes, Rin isn't thinking egoisto and Hakaisha concurrently. In this instance, the Gikun here also doesn't provide the closest translation of the loanwords. Rather, the manga is suggesting that in this specific context, there exists some correspondence between being an egoist and a destroyer. Realize though how strange all of this actually is. After all, the kanji in this instance are completely superfluous and don't even correspond to the term in kana. From what I understand, copious use of Gikun is most prominent in battle manga and isekai stories, and it oftentimes comes across as somewhat cheesy. Just for comparison, you'd get a similar experience if I added unrelated subtitles to everything I said about Gikun in this video. It probably won't surprise you that a literary device that inhabits the fault line between poetry and edginess abounds in Blue Lock, and that poses a whole series of challenges to its translators. Let me show you 2 different professional translations of the I'm Rin Itoshi scene from the U20 match. In the official French translation, we find Je suis Rin Itoshi, je suis un individualiste. I'm Rin Itoshi, I'm an egoist. Basically, the translator has in this instance chosen to simply convey Rin's actual words and leave out the Gikun reading altogether. Conversely, the official English translation has I'm Rin Itoshi, the egotistic destroyer, effectively conflating what Rin actually says with the supporting kanji readings. Now, you could easily argue that the English version is the superior translation because it adds in the extra layer of nuance that's present in the original, and from that come to the conclusion that this is the best way to convey Gikun in general. However, in many instances, that would make the dialogue come across as highly unnatural or artificial in translation. Just as an extreme example, here's a spread from chapter 141. Isagi says, "Yatemiro kaibutsu," and Bachira, "Sukondero egoisto. Just try it, monster. Don't get in my way, egotists. However, the terms kaibutsu, monster, and egoisto are Gikuns with kanji reading Bachira Meguru and Isagi Yoichi. On one level, this clarifies that Isagi means Bachira when he's calling someone a monster, and vice versa. More relevantly, however, the Gikun underscores that Bachira truly is the monster, and Isagi the egotist. After all, this moment segues directly into the scene with Bachira's monster trance, where he finally aligns his playstyle with his true nature. But that still leaves me with the question, how would you translate this spread most elegantly? Would you just leave out the names in Gikun altogether, like in the official English translation? Or maybe have Isagi say something like, "Just try it, Bachira, you monster." If you have strong opinions on the matter, go fight about it in the comments or something. So, with that much too extensive preamble out of the way, let me just pelt you with some interesting Gikun readings. When Anri speaks about producing players who can lead Japan to a World Cup victory in Chapter 1, the loanword player is coupled with kanji reading Kyuseishu, which means savior or messiah. By implication, the greatest egoist striker is also the one who will bring salvation to Japanese football. In the same chapter, Isagi regrets failing to become a superstar player like Noa. The Japanese also read superstar in the furigana, but the term is glossed with two terms in kanji, eiyu, hero, and senshu, athlete. I've talked quite a few times already about the importance of heroism in Blue Lock, and this kanji reading establishes that from a very early stage. The world's best striker is also primed to be the greatest hero. This idea is expressed most explicitly by Kunigami, to whom professional footballers are like real-life superheroes. It's therefore highly significant that the first reference to Noa equates the football superstar to a hero. As the world's best striker, he is currently the reigning hero of the football world. Let me take this even a step further. There are several other instances where someone is called a superstar, including the World 5 and the Master Strikers. Yet, in each of these instances, the term is written in katakana only, or with other kanji. So even figures like Lavinio and Prince are just superstars, not athlete heroes. However, there is one superstar who Isagi also deigns a hero, Michael Kaiser, after bringing about the impossible with his goal in the PXG match. More specifically, the term superstar is here glossed as Cho-eiyu, superhero. So basically, the reason why Isagi was spellbound by Kaiser's goal isn't just because Kaiser proved himself as an exceptional footballer, but because he unveiled himself as a star in the image of Isagi's childhood hero. That's what's being implied with these parallel readings. With that in mind, the very next big character moment for Kaiser in the PXG match also takes on much deeper significance. Here, Noa outright declares that he recognizes in Kaiser a player with the potential to rival even himself, and admits that he joined the NEL to raise his protege into a true hero. In other words, the moment that Kaiser comes into his own as a superstar hero directly segues into Noa unveiling that this was his master plan all along. Okay, let's talk about some of Blue Lock's conceptual jargon. One of the key concerns of the NEL, and the PXG match in particular, is the concept of originality. The Japanese version also uses the English term originality, but has this accompanied with a massive string of Gikun kanji. The first pair of kanji is the prefix jiko, meaning self. The second set reads doku sosei, which appears to be a relatively rare term, but it means creativity. So basically, the loanword originality is being glossed as one's self-creativity. Realizing this put another piece into place for me: Lavigno's football philosophy. From the start of the NEL, it's made clear that you need to demonstrate your originality if you want to flourish in the cutthroat world of European football. Soon after, Barcha's master provides guidance on how to discover your originality by finding your unique image and expressing it to the world. And so, when he exhorts Bachira to evolve his monster to the next stage, the Japanese version has the master tell his new disciple that his originality, which is as usual glossed as self-creativity, will be his guidepost to becoming the world's best. And so, Bachira scoring the first goal in the NEL right after this narratively confirms that he's the first of the Blue Lock candidates to have discovered his originality. Moreover, it's no coincidence that a Barca player would be the first to do so. After all, Spain is the country of playfulness and creativity, so it's perfectly fitting that its master would be the best in fostering his players' so-called self-creativity. Here's another favorite Blue Lock concept: Metavision. At risk of becoming completely repetitive, the term Metavision is also used in Japanese, accompanied with a kanji reading to clarify it. This Gikun translation is comprised of two terms: choetsu, transcendence, and shikai, field of vision. So basically, Metavision's Japanese rendition becomes something akin to transcendent view. Transcendence, though, that's an interesting term, isn't it? After all, this is a philosophical term that signifies reaching a higher plane of existence, and it's often connected with the divine. And yeah, Metavision is explicitly presented as a godlike view that transcends two-dimensional thought processes. So it's interesting that a kanji reading underscores this as the concept's core feature. Yet, there's even more here if we dissect the two kanji that comprise shikai. The first character is from the verb miru, to view or observe. The second one, kai, means world or boundary. So, shikai quite literally means to view the world. And realize here what Metavision represents for Isagi's arc in the NEL. Isagi's acquisition of Metavision demarcates the moment that our protagonist for the first time visualizes himself as beating the entire world. Unlike how he failed to imagine himself competing on a world-class level beforehand. Now, I'm far from the first to observe that Metavision appears to be restricted to world-type egotists, but this is underscored by its kanji reading. After all, Metavision is fundamentally the ability to view the world. Finally, I'll conclude the video with a few cute little details. Let's talk about Tabito Karasu for a moment. Karasu has two signature insults: dunce and mediocre. The first is aho in Japanese, and that term is associated with Kansai dialects, the dialect Karasu and Hiyori speak, because it's considered a somewhat endearing insult in Western Japan. But in addition, there's also a bit of a pun going on here. Aho is the sound that crows utter in Japanese. Aho! Aho! Aho ka! So by saying aho all the time, Karasu actually sounds like a crow. Then the second one. Readers of episode Nagi will know that Karasu's entire worldview is warped by his deep-seated belief that he's a mediocre person. The Japanese term here is bon, mediocre. For instance, when he harasses Isagi in the third selection, he constantly calls him Bon. However, when he first links up with Charles, Karasu comments that Loki's protege is the exact opposite of himself. Charles is not mediocre, but a rarity. Or, in Japanese, not a bon, but a hibon. Charles then caps this off with a bilingual pun. He responds, c'est bon, which is French for that's good. This is by far not the only example of Blue Lock characters copying each other's speech patterns to indicate that they're fully in sync. Later in the same match, Isagi takes on Kurona's habit of repeating words, and in Japanese, they even rhyme. Kurona goes vantsu vantsu, and Isagi then chokutsu chokutsu. Or in the Ubers match, Don Lorenzo has this odd speech tick where he ends many of his sentences with okay, as in the English word. So then, when the Ubers have come into their own as a team, that's underscored by the entire team taking over Lorenzo's speech pattern. I'm aware that this is also reflected in the English translation to a certain extent, but it comes across much stranger in the original, where it's even written in the Latin alphabet rather than the usual katakana characters. This okay isn't Lorenzo's only odd speech habit, by the way. For one, he has a tendency to only pronounce the verbal stem when he's using verbs, which is completely ungrammatical in Japanese. Moreover, he frequently utters two-word questions comprised of a single term followed by okay. Shuto okay, kachi nasai okay, hangeki okay, shinri okay, which, literally translated, go shoot okay, priceless okay, counterattack okay, truth okay. So, this combination of two-word sentences, simplistic and inaccurate grammar, and a repetitive verbal tick at the end of his sentences all contribute to making him sound rather zombie-like. And to conclude, I can't ignore our good friend Shidou. A funny little recurring joke is his punny nicknames for Rin. When Rin goes fully loco at the end of the U20 match, Shidou responds, very nice, Bero Rin. Bero is an informal word for tongue, and as One Piece fans will undoubtedly know, Berori is an onomatopoeic verb meaning to lick. So, with Berorin, Shidou combines Rin's name with the words tongue and lick into one neat package. Later, when Rin hijacks Charles' pass in the PXG match, Shidou calls him out as Netorin. Yes, that's from the verb netoru, to steal someone's spouse, as in netorare. And to end it on a high note, here's a gem that was posted by Twitter user Umemom, link in the description. When Shidou gets the ball in chapter 287, he goes ikanakia, meaning I have to come, but which sounds suspiciously similar to ikunakia, which can euphemistically mean I have ejaculated. And then, and this is a bit more complex, osei no, too slow, sounds a lot like osei mo. Now, there's a combination of the kanji used in osei with the kanji that usually reads mo that, when taken together, means delayed ejaculation. You're welcome. I've no idea if this video was watchable at all or if I've gone fully off the rails at this point. But if you're still here and have an interesting linguistic Blue Lock fact of your own to add, please do tell me in the comments, because I genuinely enjoy stuff like this. Either way, if you liked what you saw, consider subscribing for more in-depth Blue Lock analysis every other week. Also, I want to thank my generous €10 patrons whose continuous support helps make these videos possible. Patrician Pat, Aura G Legend, and Trishla the Best Boy. And until next time, Slangafall.